Robert Francis Kennedy was born on November 20th, 1925 in Brookline, Massachusetts. That's one word, B-R-O-O-K-L-I-N-E. Robert Francis Kennedy was born on November 20th, 1925 in Brookline, Massachusetts. He was the seventh of 9 children born to Joseph Sr. and Rose Kennedy. He was the seventh of 9 children born to Joseph Sr. and Rose Kennedy. When he was 4 years old, the Kennedy family moved from Massachusetts to New York, where Robert attended public elementary schools. So when he was 4 years old, the Kennedy family moved from Massachusetts to New York, where Robert attended public elementary schools. That was kind of unusual because Papa Joe usually liked to send him to private schools, which he did from the time he entered high school. He went to a private school until he graduated. So Robert attended public elementary schools in New York, but was sent to private schools during his high school years, eventually graduating. After he graduated from high school, a lot of people don't know this, he briefly served in the United States Navy, and he underwent officer training. So after his school years, he briefly served in the United States Navy, undergoing officer training. After his stint in the military, he went to Harvard University, where he was a 3-year letterman on the football team. Not a very big fellow, but he was a 3-year letterman for the football team at Harvard. So he goes to Harvard University, where he is a 3-year letterman for the football team. Now we all know that he had to be a lawyer because he was an Attorney General of the United States. So after he graduated from Harvard University in 1948, he enrolled at the University of Virginia School of Law. So after graduating from Harvard in 1948, he enrolled at the University of Virginia School of Law. It was during law school that he met and married Ethel Skakel. It was during law school that he met and married Ethel Skakel. It's kind of interesting because he actually dated Ethel's sister first, and then when Ethel was hanging around, he kind of ended up liking Ethel more than the sister, so he started dating up the sister. I'm not sure how that ended up in the family dynamics, but that's what happened. He earned his law degree in 1951 and went to work for his brother John Kennedy, managing his successful 1952 Senate campaign. So after earning his law degree in 1951, Robert Kennedy managed his brother John Kennedy's successful 1952 Senate campaign. After that, he began his legal or law career as a lawyer for the Department of Justice. After managing his brother's successful 1952 Senate campaign, Bobby Kennedy began his law career and became a lawyer for the Department of Justice. And he was investigating possible Soviet agents that were hiding out in the United States. That's what he did. Remember, this is during that time period of history. So when he went to work for the Department of Justice, he was investigating possible Soviet agents that were in the United States. He then got himself into a little controversy. He served as the chief counsel of the 1957 to 1959 Senate Labor Rackets Committee. I'll explain to you what that is. So he then served as chief counsel, that would be the top lawyer, during the 1957 to 59 Senate Labor Rackets Committee. 1957 through 59 Senate Labor Rackets Committee. Anybody know what that might be? What do we say when we say, boy, that guy's got a racket going on? You ever heard that expression? Anybody ever heard that? What's that mean? What's that mean? So, if I teach this night class that I teach, and I charge everybody $20 a piece every time we meet, and I got 15 people in the class, and we meet 30 times, somebody might say, boy, he's really got a good racket going there. What does that mean? Yeah, getting a lot of money for, really, does that sound reasonable that I would charge them $20 a piece every time they came and they would pay it, maybe under pressure? Rackets is kind of where you got something going that's a little shady, okay? And the thing that was so shady that was going on in 1957 through 59 is the Teamsters Union was supposedly doing some illegal activities. Anybody know what the Teamsters Union is? Who would be a member of the Teamsters? They still have them today. What's the Teamsters Union? You know, unions are a big deal. Like when I worked out in Colstrip, Montana, right out of college, I was a member of the Laborers Union. And that was just general laborers, and you had to pay so much a month to join this union, and this union represented all the laborers and brought in lots of money from the dues, and the Teamsters are people that drive trucks and those types of things. We had the Pipe Fitters Union and the Iron Workers Union, and what it is, it's an organization where they take so much out of your check and they represent you if you get yourself in a grievance or if they're not paying you enough. A union is interesting. Wyoming has teachers unions, but Wyoming's unions in the teaching profession aren't very good because this is a right-to-work state where a teacher has tenure here, you've probably heard of that, and it's not that hard to fire a teacher that has tenure in Wyoming, but it's really hard to fire a teacher that has tenure in Montana because Montana has a solid, really tough union, okay? Well, the Teamsters Union supposedly was doing illegal activities, and anybody knew the head of the Teamsters Union was? The guy that was the president of the Teamsters Union? You ever heard of a guy named Jimmy Hoffa? Maybe or maybe not, but Jimmy Hoffa was this, basically a mafia guy that was running the Teamsters Union, and he was living in a pretty nice house, and he was, you know, the top dogs in the Teamsters Union were looking pretty good, rich-wise, and anyway, Bobby Kennedy served as chief counsel of that 1957 to 59 Senate Labor Rackets Committee that was investigating the Teamsters Union and Jimmy Hoffa and all the illegal things they were supposedly doing. And the man that was the chairman of that committee was John J. McClellan. He was the chairman of the Department of Defense, or excuse me, Department of Justice Committee that Bobby Kennedy was the chief counsel for. And these guys, Chairman John L. McClellan and Bobby Kennedy and other lawyers, were digging into the actions of the Teamsters Union and Jimmy Hoffa, who had big-time ties to the mafia. Okay. Now Kennedy stood up to Jimmy Hoffa, which was kind of unusual. Everybody thought he was kind of stupid for doing that. Remember we talked about John Kennedy saying he wouldn't cancel on Daley when he was during the Cuban Missile Crisis. He was going to cancel on Daley, and they were teasing him, Kenneth O'Donnell. Yeah, you go ahead and cancel on Daley because Daley supposedly had ties to the mafia, and that wouldn't be somebody you cancel on. Well, Bobby Kennedy taking on Jimmy Hoffa was like committing suicide in some people's minds, because this guy was a powerful mafia guy. And you know, we talked about Bobby Kennedy's assassination. There was always the conspiracy theory that the mafia and Jimmy Hoffa's group put Sirhan up to this. It just goes crazy. But anyway, Kennedy stood up to the president of the Teamsters Union. He pressed him hard on legal activities in front of the Senate, and it really got kind of ugly. And Jimmy Hoffa hated Bobby Kennedy's guts for the rest of his life, and there was always that controversy before Jimmy Hoffa mysteriously disappeared one day, and some believe he is buried in the concrete of Giant Stadium in New Jersey. That's another story. If you get really bored sometime, get on Netflix and watch a movie called Hoffa, and you'll understand kind of a little bit more about Jimmy Hoffa. Well, what did he do after that? He served as his brother's campaign manager in the presidential election of 1960. He served as his brother's campaign manager in the election of 1960, and of course we know after that, his brother appointed him to Attorney General of the United States. Now, some of these things you can write down or not because you know some of them. Remember that he remained as Attorney General under President Johnson for a brief time, but because there was bad blood between the two, he resigned and did what? Come on now. Moved to New York and ran for the Senate. Okay? So we know that after he left the Johnson cabinet, he ran for the United States Senate representing the state of New York. And I told you this and you saw it on the video, he won the seat, defeating the incumbent candidate, Kenneth Keating. Defeated the incumbent candidate, Kenneth Keating. Now, a lot of people don't give Bobby credit that he really did anything during his short stint in the New York Senate, but I'm going to give you 4 things that he did do. 4 things that he did do as Senator of New York, although I don't think he gets enough credit for it. First of all, he started to redevelop poverty-stricken areas of New York City. He began to redevelop poverty-stricken areas of New York City. He built development areas in poverty-stricken areas of New York City. Second thing he did is he campaigned vigorously against further escalation of the Vietnam War. He campaigned vigorously against further escalation of the Vietnam War. Third thing he did is he worked very, very hard for African Americans and other minorities. He worked very, very hard for African Americans and other minorities. And the fourth thing he did is he committed himself to the poor across the entire United States. He committed himself to the poor all across the United States. You probably remember from the video that he went down and saw some of the living conditions in Mississippi. Couldn't believe it. He said he'd been to third world countries and seen better conditions. And went home to his family as they were eating dinner and said, "You don't know how lucky you are to have it as you do." He'd never seen such poverty across the United States, and he committed himself to the poor. As we mentioned, many people believed he would win the Democratic nomination for the presidency and possibly win the presidency until that fateful day of June 4th, 1968. Okay, I would get your notes organized. I will leave these lecture videos up. You will have an opportunity to peruse those if you have any questions. Let me look real quick like at the test. Test has 50 answers. They'll be worth 2 apiece. The test will be worth 100. Okay, it'll be open note, obviously, and we'll have that on Tuesday. So report straight to the Commons, and we'll have that test on Tuesday. All right, I'm going to